Long before the great empires of the West rose and fell, the archipelago of Japan, born of fire and ocean, began to shape its unique destiny. Around 10,000 BCE, as the last ice age receded, the first distinct culture, known as the Jomon, emerged on these verdant islands, marking the earliest known human habitation. Imagine a world where the land itself was alive with spirits, where mountains breathed and rivers sang. And the very act of living was an intricate dance with nature's raw power. The Jomon people, hunter-gatherers and skilled potters, crafted intricate earthenware vessels, some of the oldest in the world, long before agriculture transformed human societies elsewhere. Their lives were intimately connected to the rhythms of the seasons, their shelters simple pit dwellings, their tools fashioned from stone and bone. Yet their artistry speaks of a profound spiritual connection to their surroundings. As millennia passed, a new wave of people arrived, around 300 BCE, bringing with them the transformative knowledge of rice cultivation and metallurgy. This period, known as the Yayoi, saw the gradual shift from a nomadic existence to settled agricultural communities. Picture the landscape changing as dense forests gave way to irrigated rice paddies, shimmering emerald green under the rising sun. Bronze and iron tools, brought from the Asian mainland, revolutionized farming and warfare. This era also marked the beginning of social stratification, as surplus food allowed for the emergence of leaders and the accumulation of wealth. Small villages began to coalesce into larger, more complex societies, and the first hints of distinct political entities appeared, though still fragmented and localized. The whispers of a unified land began to grow louder around 250 CE, with the dawn of the Kofun period, named for the massive keyhole-shaped burial mounds, or kofun, that dot the landscape. These monumental tombs, some stretching for hundreds of meters, were built for powerful clan leaders, signifying a clear hierarchy and the increasing consolidation of power. Imagine thousands of laborers toiling for years, shaping the earth into these colossal resting places, each one a testament to the might and influence of those interred within. Inside, treasures of bronze mirrors, iron weapons, and elaborate clay figures known as haniwa were placed, hinting at the beliefs and daily lives of the elite. It was during this time that the Yamato clan, based in the fertile Kenai Plain, began to assert its dominance over other clans. They skillfully leveraged their military prowess and, perhaps more importantly, their claim to divine lineage, to gradually expand their influence. The Yamato court, by the 6th century CE, began to adopt elements of Chinese culture and governance, including Buddhism and a more centralized administrative system. This influx of continental ideas profoundly shaped early Japanese society. Imagine the awe and wonder as Buddhist monks arrived, bringing with them intricate scriptures, complex philosophies, and magnificent artistry. The construction of grand temples, adorned with gilded statues, began to transform the spiritual landscape. This period also saw the development of a written language, adapted from Chinese characters, allowing for the recording of history, law, and poetry. The Yamato rulers, now increasingly referred to as Tenno or emperors, began to solidify their position as the symbolic and spiritual heads of the emerging nation, though their actual political power often varied. Yet, even as the imperial court sought to centralize authority, the foundational structure of Japanese society remained rooted in powerful regional clans, or uji. Each uji was a semi-autonomous unit, bound by kinship and loyalty to its chief, who in turn might pledge allegiance to the Yamato emperor. These clan leaders were not merely administrators, they were often warriors, protectors of their lands and people. This decentralized power structure, with its intricate web of alliances and rivalries, laid the groundwork for the eventual rise of a distinct warrior class. The court, while holding symbolic authority, relied heavily on these regional strongmen to maintain order and collect resources. A fascinating aspect of this early period is the role of the Soga clan. While the Yamato emperors held the divine mandate, the Soga, a powerful aristocratic family, wielded immense political influence during the 6th and early 7th centuries. They aggressively promoted Buddhism and Chinese-style reforms, often marrying their daughters into the imperial family, effectively controlling the succession and policy. This created a tension, a subtle power struggle between the symbolic authority of the emperor and the practical power of the leading aristocratic families. Historians still debate the extent to which the Soga truly controlled the imperial line versus simply being the most powerful family of their era, reflecting the fluid nature of early Japanese politics. Their ambition, however, eventually led to their downfall, as other clans, notably the Nakatomi and Fujiwara, resented their dominance. The Taika reforms, enacted in 645 CE, were a pivotal moment, an ambitious attempt to transform Japan into a centralized, Chinese-style bureaucratic state. Imagine a grand declaration, a sweeping set of edicts designed to dismantle the old clan system and establish a new order. Land was theoretically nationalized and redistributed. A census was taken, and a system of taxation was introduced. The goal was to create a strong, unified government directly controlled by the emperor, rather than relying on the whims of powerful clans. While these reforms were never fully implemented as intended, they represented a significant shift in political thought and laid the ideological foundation for a more centralized state. They also introduced the concept of a merit-based bureaucracy, though in practice, aristocratic lineage often trumped pure talent. The capital moved frequently during this time, a reflection of the evolving political landscape, until the establishment of Heijō-kyo, modern-day Nara, in 710 CE. This city, modeled after the Tang Chinese capital of Chang'an, was a grand vision of imperial power, with broad avenues, magnificent palaces, and imposing Buddhist temples. Imagine the bustling streets, filled with courtiers in colorful silks, scholars debating philosophy, and artisans crafting exquisite works of art. Nara became a vibrant center of culture and learning, a place where the imperial court flourished, dedicating itself to poetry, calligraphy, and the pursuit of refined aesthetics. This was an era of relative peace and cultural blossoming, where the focus was on elegance and spiritual enlightenment. However, even as the court indulged in its sophisticated pursuits, the seeds of future conflict were being sown in the provinces. The Taika reforms, while aiming for centralization, also created new land tenure systems that inadvertently allowed powerful local families to accumulate vast estates, often tax-exempt. These private estates, known as shoen, grew in size and influence, gradually eroding the central government's control over the land and its resources. The provincial governors, appointed by the court, often lacked true authority, and local magnates, many of whom were descendants of the very clans the reforms sought to curb, became increasingly independent. As the 8th century drew to a close, a growing concern about the influence of the powerful Buddhist monasteries in Nara led to another significant move. In 794 CE, the capital was relocated to Heian-kyo, modern-day Kyoto, where it would remain for over 1,000 years. This move marked the beginning of the Heian period, an era synonymous with the peak of aristocratic culture and aesthetic refinement. Imagine a city nestled between mountains, its layout designed to harmonize with the principles of geomancy, its palaces and gardens reflecting a profound appreciation for beauty. The Heian court became a world unto itself, a place where poetry, music, and elaborate rituals dominated daily life. Courtiers, particularly women, produced some of the world's earliest and most enduring literary masterpieces, such as Murasaki Shikibu's The Tale of Genji, offering a rare glimpse into the intricate social dynamics and emotional lives of the elite. Yet, beneath this veneer of refined elegance, the practical administration of the provinces continued to weaken. The imperial court, increasingly absorbed in its own artistic and ceremonial world, delegated more and more responsibility for maintaining order and collecting taxes to regional leaders. These provincial officials, often members of aristocratic families who had been sent away from the capital, began to build their own power bases. They organized local militias to protect their estates from bandits and rival clans, and to enforce their authority over the peasants. This was a crucial development. As the central government's military capacity waned, the need for local protection grew, fostering the conditions for the emergence of a specialized warrior class. The term samurai itself, derived from the word saburao, meaning to serve or to attend, began to appear around this time, initially referring to those who served the nobility. These early samurai were not yet the hardened, independent warriors of later centuries, but rather armed retainers, bodyguards, and enforcers for the aristocratic families. They were often skilled archers and horsemen, trained in the martial arts necessary to protect their lord's interests. Their emergence was a gradual process, born out of necessity rather than a sudden decree. As the Heian court became increasingly detached from the realities of provincial life, these armed servants became indispensable to the local magnates. The rise of these provincial warrior bands was also fueled by the ongoing need to pacify the Emishi, the indigenous people of northern Honshu, who resisted imperial expansion. For centuries, the Yamato court had waged campaigns against the Emishi, and these frontier wars provided a training ground for warriors and a means for ambitious regional lords to gain prestige and land. Lesser-known historical details include the fact that some Emishi leaders, like Atarui in the late 8th century, proved to be formidable adversaries, inflicting significant defeats on imperial forces before eventually being subdued. These conflicts honed the martial skills of the nascent samurai and solidified their role as protectors of the realm, albeit often for their own local lords rather than the distant emperor. By the 10th and 11th centuries, the two most powerful warrior clans had emerged, the Minamoto and the Taira. Both were descended from imperial princes who had been demoted from the imperial line and sent to the provinces to serve as officials. This practice, intended to reduce the number of imperial family members reliant on state support, inadvertently created powerful new aristocratic warrior lineages. Imagine these families, growing in strength and influence in the distant provinces, developing their own distinct martial traditions and codes of conduct. They built vast networks of loyal retainers, often forming close bonds with their followers based on mutual protection and shared destiny. The stage was now set for the transformation of Japanese society. The delicate balance of power between the refined imperial court, the powerful aristocratic families, and the increasingly self-reliant provincial warrior clans was becoming unstable. The court's authority, once absolute in theory, was now largely symbolic. The real power was shifting outwards, into the hands of those who commanded military might and controlled land. The land itself, once a source of imperial revenue, was now increasingly fragmented into private estates, each with its own armed protectors. This decentralization of power, a slow but inexorable process, would eventually lead to a period of intense conflict and the establishment of a warrior government, fundamentally reshaping the course of Japanese history. The era of the samurai was not born in a single moment, but rather emerged from centuries of evolving social, political, and military dynamics, culminating in a profound shift in who held the reins of power. If you're enjoying this, liking and subscribing truly helps and is much appreciated. The gentle hum of the cicadas seemed to carry the whispers of change across the land, a subtle shift in the very fabric of power that had long defined Japan. The imperial court in Kyoto, once the undisputed heart of the nation, now felt a growing chill, a slow diminishment of its authority. For generations, the Fujiwara regents had guided the emperors, their influence weaving through the court like silken threads. But a new force, born from the provinces and forged in the crucible of warfare, was rising. The Genpei War, a conflict that had rent the archipelago asunder, had irrevocably altered the landscape of power. It was a struggle that pitted two great warrior clans against each other, the Minamoto and the Taira. The Taira, with their refined courtly manners and their proximity to the emperor, had initially seemed ascendant, their red banners fluttering defiantly. Yet it was the Minamoto, hardy and disciplined, led by the astute Minamoto no Yoritomo, who ultimately triumphed. Their victory at Dan no Ura in 1185, a naval battle fought with desperate ferocity in the churning straits, marked the end of an era. The Taira clan was annihilated, their power shattered, and with them the last vestiges of true imperial military might. Yoritomo, a man of keen intellect and unyielding resolve, understood that simply replacing one courtly power with another would not suffice. He had witnessed the weaknesses of a system where power was diffuse and often manipulated. His vision was different, a centralized military government, strong enough to maintain order across the disparate provinces, yet distinct from the ceremonial court in Kyoto. He chose Kamakura, a coastal town nestled between mountains and the sea, far from the intrigues of the capital, as his base. Here, in 1192, he formally established the Kamakura Shogunate, becoming the first shogun, a title meaning commander-in-chief of the expeditionary force against the barbarians. This marked a profound turning point in Japanese history, ushering in nearly 7 centuries of samurai rule. The emperor remained a revered figurehead, performing rituals and bestowing legitimacy. But the true reins of power, the administration of justice, the collection of taxes, and the command of armies, now firmly rested in Kamakura. The early years of the shogunate were characterized by a meticulous consolidation of power. Yoritomo, ever pragmatic, established a sophisticated administrative structure. He created the Mandokoro, a central administrative board to handle civil and financial affairs, the Monchujo, a board of inquiry to oversee judicial matters, and perhaps most importantly, the Samurai Decoro, a board of retainers, to manage the affairs of his warrior vassals. This last institution was crucial, as it formalized the relationship between the shogun and his samurai, ensuring their loyalty and discipline. He appointed military governors, or shugo, to each province, and estate stewards, or jito, to individual manors. These appointments, often granted to his most trusted retainers, gave the samurai a direct stake in the land and its productivity, further cementing their allegiance to Kamakura. The system, though hierarchical, was designed to be efficient, bringing a new level of stability to a land long prone to internal strife. Yet, even a strong foundation can be tested. After Yoritomo's death in 1199, a quiet struggle for influence began. His wife, Hojo Masako, a formidable woman known as the Nun Shogun for her political acumen, and her Hojo family gradually asserted their control. They acted as regents for the shoguns, often young and inexperienced, effectively wielding the true power behind the scenes. This period, while complex, further solidified the institutional framework of the shogunate. The Hojo Regency proved remarkably stable, guiding Japan through several decades of relative peace and prosperity, allowing the samurai class to further refine its martial traditions and its unique code of ethics. The pursuit of military excellence, the cultivation of self-discipline, and the unwavering loyalty to one's lord became the bedrock of the samurai identity during this era. They were not merely soldiers. They were administrators, landowners, and guardians of a new order. This burgeoning stability, however, was about to face an unprecedented challenge from beyond the seas, a threat that would test the very limits of the samurai's resolve and the nation's resilience. Across the vast expanse of the Asian continent, a storm was brewing, one that would soon unleash its fury upon the shores of Japan. Genghis Khan had forged an empire of unparalleled scale, his Mongol horsemen sweeping across steppes and through ancient kingdoms with terrifying speed and efficiency. By the mid-13th century, his grandson, Kublai Khan, had extended Mongol dominion to China, establishing the Yuan dynasty. His ambition, however, did not stop at the mainland. He cast his gaze eastward, towards the island nation of Japan, a land he saw as ripe for conquest and tribute. The first ominous rumble of this impending storm came in 1268, when Kublai Khan sent envoys to Japan, demanding submission and tribute. The Kamakura Shogunate, steeped in its own traditions and fiercely independent, viewed these demands with disdain. They saw no reason to bow to a foreign power, especially one that had conquered their cultural mentor, China. The envoys were sent back, their messages unanswered, a clear defiance that Kublai Khan, accustomed to immediate obedience, would not tolerate. More envoys followed over the next few years, each met with the same resolute silence or outright rejection. The tension mounted, a palpable sense of dread hanging over the archipelago as the Japanese prepared for the inevitable. In 1274, the first Mongol invasion fleet, a formidable armada comprising around 900 ships and an estimated 40,000 soldiers, a mix of Mongols, Chinese, and Koreans, set sail for Japan. They landed at Hakata Bay in Kyushu. The samurai, accustomed to ritualized single combat and individual prowess, were initially bewildered by the Mongol tactics. The invaders fought as a cohesive unit, employing composite bows with a devastating range and accuracy, and utilizing gunpowder bombs, a terrifying new weapon that exploded with a deafening roar and a blinding flash. The Japanese warriors, brave as they were, found themselves facing an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered. Accounts speak of the chaos and confusion, the sheer scale of the Mongol forces overwhelming the local defenders. Yet, despite the initial shock, the samurai adapted with remarkable speed. They abandoned their traditional dueling practices and began to engage the Mongols in mass formations, using their superior swordsmanship and knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. The fighting was fierce and bloody, a desperate struggle for survival. As night fell on the first day of battle, the Mongols, perhaps unfamiliar with night fighting in this unfamiliar land, withdrew to their ships. Then, as if by divine intervention, a sudden violent storm descended upon Hakata Bay. The tempest, a raging typhoon, battered the Mongol fleet, scattering ships, smashing them against the shore, and drowning thousands of soldiers. The remnants of the invasion force, demoralized and decimated, retreated, their grand ambition thwarted by the fury of nature. The Japanese, witnessing this miraculous deliverance, named the storm Kamikaze, meaning divine wind, believing it to be a sign of divine protection. The respite, however, was merely a pause. Kublai Khan, his pride wounded and his ambition undimmed, was not one to abandon a conquest so easily. He immediately began preparations for a second, even larger invasion. This time, he amassed a truly colossal force. 2 separate fleets, one from Korea and one from southern China, totaling an estimated 4,400 ships and perhaps as many as 140,000 soldiers. So it was, by far, the largest naval invasion attempt in history until the D-Day landings of World War II. The Japanese, knowing the Mongols would return, did not waste the intervening years. They fortified their defenses along the coast of Kyushu, building a 2-meter-high stone wall stretching for miles along Hakata Bay, a formidable barrier against future landings. They also drilled their samurai, refining tactics to counter the Mongol way of war. In the summer of 1281, the Second Mongol invasion began. The sheer scale of the fleet must have been a terrifying sight, a horizon filled with sails. The Mongol forces landed again at Hakata Bay, but this time they met a prepared and resolute enemy. The stone wall proved an effective impediment, preventing a swift landing and forcing the Mongols into prolonged, grueling engagements at sea and on the beaches. The samurai, fighting with their backs to their homeland, displayed incredible bravery and tenacity. They launched daring night raids on the Mongol ships, using small boats to board and attack, sowing chaos and fear among the invaders. The fighting dragged on for weeks, a brutal stalemate under the summer sun. And then, once again, the heavens intervened. In mid-August, another colossal typhoon, even more powerful than the first, struck Hakata Bay. The storm raged for 2 days. Unleashing its full fury on the anchored Mongol fleet, ships were ripped apart, masts snapped, and thousands upon thousands of soldiers were drowned or dashed against the rocky coast. The devastation was absolute. Only a fraction of the mighty invasion force survived, and those who did were too demoralized and broken to continue the fight. The second Kamikaze had delivered an even more decisive blow, forever etching the divine wind into the annals of Japanese history. The Mongol invasions, though ultimately repelled, left an indelible mark on Japan, and particularly on the samurai class. The immediate aftermath brought a sense of profound relief, but also a new set of challenges. The shogunate had incurred enormous expenses in preparing for and fighting the invasions, and the traditional rewards of conquest, new lands, and spoils of war were absent. This led to widespread discontent among the samurai, who had fought so valiantly, many of whom felt their sacrifices were not adequately recognized or compensated. This financial strain and the growing dissatisfaction among the warrior class would, in time, contribute to the weakening of the Kamakura shogunate. Beyond the financial and political ramifications, the invasions profoundly shaped the samurai identity. The experience of facing a numerically superior, technologically advanced, and utterly alien enemy forced them to evolve. They learned the importance of collective action, of strategic defense, and of adapting their traditional martial arts to new forms of warfare. The kamikaze reinforced their belief in Japan's unique divine protection, fostering a deep sense of national identity and exceptionalism. This belief that Japan was a land specially favored by the gods would resonate through centuries of its history. Moreover, the invasions cemented the samurai's position as the undisputed protectors of the realm. Their martial prowess, their unwavering courage in the face of overwhelming odds, and their willingness to lay down their lives for their lord and their land became the defining characteristics of their class. The ideal of Bushido, the way of the warrior, though not formally codified until much later, began to take clearer shape during this period. Loyalty, honor, courage, and self-sacrifice were not just abstract concepts. They were lived realities forged in the crucible of battle against the Mongol hordes. Historians still debate the precise impact of the kamikaze on the outcome of the invasions. Was it truly a miraculous intervention, or simply a stroke of incredibly bad luck for the Mongols, who were known to suffer from typhoons in the East China Sea? While the storms undoubtedly played a decisive role, it is also clear that the Japanese defense was robust and well-organized. The fortified walls, the tenacious resistance of the samurai, and their willingness to engage in prolonged, attritional warfare significantly hampered the Mongol advance, even before the typhoon struck. Perhaps it was a combination of both: the unwavering spirit of the samurai, coupled with the fortuitous intervention of nature, that ultimately saved Japan from foreign conquest. Regardless of the precise balance, the memory of the kamikaze became a powerful symbol, a testament to Japan's resilience and its unique destiny. The Kamakura Shogunate, though it survived the Mongol invasions, never fully recovered its former stability. The internal stresses, the unpaid debts to the samurai, and the increasing influence of the Hojo regents created a slow erosion of trust and loyalty. Yet, the legacy of this era was profound. It was during these centuries that the samurai truly came into their own, not just as warriors, but as the ruling class, shaping the social, political, and cultural landscape of Japan for generations to come. The image of the lone samurai, standing firm against an overwhelming tide, became an enduring symbol of Japanese spirit. A testament to the enduring power of courage and conviction in the face of insurmountable odds. The echoes of those storms and the clash of steel against the Mongol advance would forever resonate in the heart of the warrior. The gentle currents of time, which had cradled the Kamakura shogunate for over a century, began to stir, growing turbulent as the 14th century dawned. The very foundation upon which the Hojo Regency had built its power, the unwavering loyalty of the samurai, started to fray. Two successive Mongol invasions in the late 13th century, though ultimately repelled by fierce Japanese resistance and the fabled kamikaze or divine winds, had left the shogunate in a precarious financial state. The cost of maintaining the coastal defenses, coupled with the lack of spoils from a defeated enemy, meant that the samurai who had risked their lives in defense of the realm received little or no reward. Their lands were already held, and there was no new territory to distribute. This economic strain fostered deep resentment among the warrior class, chipping away at their allegiance to Kamakura. Adding to the instability was a simmering dispute within the imperial court itself. For decades, two rival branches of the imperial family, the senior line and the junior line, had vied for the chrysanthemum throne. A compromise had been reached, dictating that the succession would alternate between the two lines. But this fragile peace shattered in the early 1330s. Emperor Go-Daigo of the junior line, a man of formidable intellect and ambition, sought to restore direct imperial rule, bypassing the shogunate entirely. He was a figure of great conviction, believing the shogunate had usurped the rightful authority of the emperor, and he began to secretly conspire against Kamakura. His plans were discovered, and Go-Daigo was exiled to the remote Oki Islands in 1331. Yet his spirit remained unbroken. From his exile, he continued to rally support, sending out calls to arms to influential warrior clans. Among those who answered was a figure who would indelibly mark this period, Ashikaga Takauji. Takauji was a powerful general, a descendant of the Minamoto clan, and initially sent by the Hojo to suppress Go-Daigo's rebellion. But as he marched eastward, a profound shift occurred within him. Perhaps swayed by Go-Daigo's charisma, or perhaps recognizing the growing weakness of the Hojo, Takauji made a momentous decision. He switched his allegiance. Instead of attacking the imperial forces, he turned his army against Kamakura itself. The fall of Kamakura in 1333 was swift and brutal. The Hojo clan, cornered and facing overwhelming odds, chose a tragic collective end. Thousands of warriors, including the last Hojo regent, committed seppuku within the walls of their burning city, a final defiant act of loyalty to a fading era. This event marked the end of the Kamakura shogunate, a system that had endured for 140 years. With the Hojo gone, Emperor Go-Daigo returned to Kyoto, initiating what is known as the Kenmu Restoration. He envisioned a Japan where the emperor held absolute power, reminiscent of ancient China, with the warrior class subservient to the imperial court. However, his vision clashed sharply with the realities of a society long accustomed to warrior rule. Go-Daigo's distribution of land and titles often favored court nobles over the very samurai who had fought for his restoration, leading to widespread discontent. The warriors, who had expected to be rewarded for their pivotal role in overthrowing the Hojo, felt increasingly marginalized. Ashikaga Takauji, the very general who had been instrumental in Go-Daigo's return, found himself at the heart of this growing dissatisfaction. He had hoped for a prominent role in the new government, but Go-Daigo's policies seemed to diminish the warrior class as a whole. The tension between the imperial court and the powerful samurai clans escalated, leading to an inevitable rupture. In 1336, Takauji, now representing the grievances of the warrior class, once again marched on Kyoto. Emperor Go-Daigo fled, taking the imperial regalia with him, and established a rival court in the mountains of Yoshino. South of Kyoto. This marked the beginning of the Nanboku-cho, or Northern and Southern Courts period, a tumultuous era that lasted for nearly 60 years. Takauji, having installed a new emperor in Kyoto from the senior line, established his own shogunate in 1338, known as the Ashikaga shogunate or the Muromachi shogunate, named after the district in Kyoto where its headquarters were located. This period is a fascinating example of a scholarly dispute. Historians still debate whether Takauji was a loyal servant of the emperor who was forced to act by circumstances, or a cunning opportunist who simply seized power when the moment was right. His actions certainly had profound consequences, ushering in a new age of warrior dominance. yet one perpetually shadowed by the legitimacy of the rival southern court. The Ashikaga shoguns, unlike their Kamakura predecessors, chose to reside in Kyoto, close to the imperial court. This proximity led to a unique cultural fusion, where the austere warrior aesthetic began to blend with the refined sensibilities of the court aristocracy. Zen Buddhism, already influential, flourished under Ashikaga patronage, deeply impacting art, architecture, and garden design. The elegant Kinkakuji, the Golden Pavilion, built by the third Ashikaga shogun, Ashikaga Yoshimitsu, stands as a testament to this period's artistic achievements. Reflecting a blend of warrior strength and courtly grace, Yoshimitsu, in particular, was a powerful and ambitious shogun who managed to bring the northern and southern courts' conflict to a temporary halt in 1392, persuading the southern court emperor to return the imperial regalia to the northern court, thus reunifying the imperial line. However, the peace was fleeting. The Ashikaga shogunate, despite its cultural brilliance, never achieved the same centralized control as Kamakura. The shoguns relied heavily on powerful regional lords, known as shugo, to maintain order. These shugo were initially appointed by the shogunate to govern provinces, but over time, they accumulated vast local power, building their own armies and fortifying their castles. They often acted more like independent rulers than mere provincial governors. This decentralization of power sowed the seeds for future conflict. The Ashikaga shoguns also faced internal struggles within their own clan and among their key retainers. A lesser-known detail about the Ashikaga period is the role of the Kanrei, a powerful position akin to a chief minister, often held by members of three prominent families, the Hosokawa, Shiba, and Hatakeyama. These families often wielded more practical power than the shoguns themselves, leading to intricate political maneuvering and frequent power struggles that weakened the shogunate from within. The slow unraveling of the Ashikaga shogunate culminated in the Onin War, which erupted in 1467. This conflict, initially a succession dispute within the Ashikaga family, quickly spiraled into a decade-long struggle involving the most powerful shugo families of the time. Kyoto, the capital, became a battleground. Its elegant temples and aristocratic mansions reduced to ashes. The war was not a decisive victory for any single faction, but rather a devastating stalemate that left the shogunate's authority in tatters. The Onin War is often cited as the definitive beginning of the Sengoku Jidai, the Warring States period. The Sengoku Jidai, stretching from the late 15th century through the late 16th century, was a time of relentless civil war and profound social upheaval. With the shogunate's power effectively shattered, the shugo lords, now known as daimyo, literally great names, rose to absolute prominence. These daimyo were not merely provincial governors, they were independent warlords, each striving to expand their territory, consolidate their power, and ultimately unify Japan under their own banner. The land was carved into countless domains, each ruled by a daimyo who commanded his own army of samurai. The traditional social hierarchy began to shift dramatically. The principle of Gekkokujo, or the low overthrowing the high, became commonplace. Ambitious and capable samurai of humble origins could rise to power by demonstrating military prowess and cunning, often at the expense of their former lords. This era saw the emergence of legendary figures like Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu, the three great unifiers of Japan. Life for the common people during the Sengoku Jidai was fraught with peril. Villages were often caught between warring factions, their crops destroyed, and their lives disrupted. Yet, amidst the chaos, there was also innovation. Castle building reached new heights, with massive stone fortifications replacing earlier, more vulnerable wooden structures. Military tactics evolved, incorporating the use of firearms introduced by the Portuguese in the mid-16th century. The arrival of European traders and missionaries also brought new ideas, technologies, and even new religions, adding another layer of complexity to the already volatile landscape. The Sengoku period was a crucible that forged a new kind of samurai. Loyalty, while still valued, became more fluid, often shifting based on strategic advantage or the promise of greater reward. The emphasis was on practical skill, adaptability, and ruthless efficiency. The warrior's code, Bushido, though not formally codified until later, was certainly being shaped by the harsh realities of constant warfare. The ideal samurai of this era was not just a skilled swordsman, but also a cunning strategist, a capable administrator, and a master of political intrigue. The land itself seemed to groan under the weight of endless conflict. Smoke would often smudge the horizon from burning villages, and the silence of the night was frequently broken by the distant cries of battle. Yet, even in this age of strife, the Japanese spirit for art and beauty persisted. The tea ceremony, with its emphasis on harmony and tranquility, continued to be practiced, offering moments of respite from the brutal realities of war. Landscape gardening, though perhaps on a smaller scale, still sought to capture the essence of nature's beauty. It was a paradox, a society tearing itself apart, yet still capable of profound artistic expression. Perhaps these moments of quiet beauty were even more cherished, serving as anchors in a storm-tossed world. The dream of a unified Japan, a land at peace, became the ultimate prize, one that generations of daimyo fought and died for, setting the stage for the dramatic conclusion of this long and bloody chapter. The whispers of a unified Japan, though faint, had begun to stir across the archipelago, carried on the winds of change. For centuries, the land had been fractured, a mosaic of warring domains, each daimyo carving out their own small kingdom, their samurai clashing in endless skirmishes. Yet from this crucible of conflict, three figures would emerge, each uniquely suited to the monumental task of forging a single nation from countless fragments. Their names would echo through history: Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu. The first to rise, a man of audacious vision and ruthless efficiency, was Oda Nobunaga. Born in 1534, his early years were marked by eccentricity, earning him the moniker Fool of Owari. But beneath this unconventional exterior lay a mind of strategic brilliance and a relentless ambition. He was among the first to truly grasp the transformative power of firearms, which had arrived in Japan with Portuguese traders in the mid-16th century. While many samurai clung to their traditional bows and swords, Nobunaga embraced the arquebus, training his troops in mass volley fire, a tactic that would prove devastatingly effective. His victory at the Battle of Okehazama in 1560, where he, with a vastly outnumbered force, ambushed and defeated the powerful Imagawa Yoshimoto, cemented his reputation as a military genius. Imagine the swirling mists of dawn, the unexpected charge, and the sudden terrifying roar of muskets shattering the morning quiet. Nobunaga's campaigns were swift and brutal. He sought to dismantle the old order, challenging the authority of the Buddhist monasteries, which had grown immensely powerful and often fielded their own armies. His destruction of the Enryaku-ji monastery on Mount Hiei in 1571, a revered center of Buddhist learning, sent shockwaves across Japan. It was an act of calculated terror, designed to break the spiritual and military power of the temples, and it underscored his unwavering resolve. He was not merely conquering lands, he was reshaping the very fabric of society, paving the way for a centralized state. He built magnificent castles, like Azuchi Castle, a towering symbol of his power and a testament to his innovative spirit. Incorporating European architectural elements and showcasing unparalleled luxury. Yet, despite his grand designs, Nobunaga's temperament could be volatile, and his rise created many enemies. Perhaps one of the most intriguing aspects of Nobunaga's reign, and a point of scholarly debate, revolves around his true intentions regarding the imperial court. While he certainly sought to control the nation, some historians argue whether he genuinely intended to usurp the emperor's position or merely to use the imperial authority as a legitimizing tool for his own rule. There are hints that he envisioned a new form of governance, one that transcended the traditional samurai hierarchy. But his sudden end left these questions unanswered. His relentless drive for unification, however, was cut short in 1582. Betrayed by one of his most trusted generals, Akechi Mitsuhide, Nobunaga was cornered in the Honnoji Temple in Kyoto. Rather than surrender, he chose to commit seppuku, his life ending amidst the flames of the burning temple. The dream of a unified Japan, so close to his grasp, seemed to dissolve into ash. But from the ashes, another figure emerged, one who had risen from the humblest of origins to become Nobunaga's most loyal and capable general, Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Born in 1537, the son of a peasant farmer, Hideyoshi's ascent was nothing short of miraculous. He began his career as a sandal-bearer for Nobunaga. His quick wit, boundless energy, and uncanny ability to charm and persuade quickly catching his lord's attention. He was a master of logistics, known for building castles in impossibly short times, and for his clever sieges, such as the famous water siege of Takamatsu Castle. Upon hearing of Nobunaga's betrayal, Hideyoshi acted with 37. He swiftly negotiated a truce with the Mori clan, his current adversaries, and marched his army back to Kyoto, covering vast distances in a matter of days. This incredible feat, known as the Chugoku Ogaeshi, or Great Return from Chugoku, allowed him to confront and defeat Akechi Mitsuhide at the Battle of Yamazaki just 11 days after Nobunaga's death. This decisive victory established Hideyoshi as Nobunaga's true successor. Unlike Nobunaga, was a man of diplomacy and persuasion, though he could be ruthless when necessary. He continued Nobunaga's work of unification, but often through negotiation and strategic alliances rather than outright conquest. He consolidated his power, receiving the prestigious title of Kampaku, Imperial Regent, in 1585, a position that solidified his authority over the entire nation. He initiated a series of reforms designed to stabilize the country and prevent future rebellions. The sword hunt of 1588 disarmed the peasantry, ensuring that only samurai could possess weapons, thereby separating the warrior class from the farmers and reducing the likelihood of peasant uprisings. He also conducted a nationwide land survey, the Taiko Kenchi, which standardized land measurements and taxation, laying the groundwork for a more efficient and centralized administration. His rule brought a period of unprecedented peace and prosperity to Japan. He built Osaka Castle, an even grander fortress than Azuchi, a testament to his power and a symbol of the new unified Japan. He patronized the arts, particularly the tea ceremony, elevating it to a high art form and using it as a tool for political networking. Imagine the delicate clinking of porcelain, the fragrant steam rising, and the hushed conversations that shaped the destiny of a nation within the serene confines of a tea house. However, Hideyoshi's ambition eventually led him beyond Japan's shores, in a move that historians still debate the true motivations behind. He launched two massive invasions of Korea in 1592 and 1597, intending to conquer China as well. Some scholars believe it was a way to keep the restless samurai occupied, while others suggest it was a genuine, if hubristic, attempt to establish a vast East Asian empire. These campaigns, though initially successful, ultimately ended in costly failure, draining Japan's resources and lives. They left a lasting impact on Korean-Japanese relations and remain a complex part of Hideyoshi's legacy. Hideyoshi died in 1598, leaving behind a young son, Hideyori, and a council of 5 regents, including the third and final unifier, Tokugawa Ieyasu, to govern until Hideyori came of age. This fragile arrangement, however, was destined to unravel. Tokugawa Ieyasu, born in 1543, was a man of immense patience, resilience, and strategic foresight. His early life was a crucible of hardship. As a child, he was held hostage by rival clans, first the Oda and then the Imagawa, a common practice in feudal Japan to secure alliances. These experiences instilled in him a deep understanding of power dynamics and the importance of long-term planning. He had been a loyal, if cautious, ally of Nobunaga and later served Hideyoshi, carefully biding his time, consolidating his own domain in the Kanto region, and building a formidable army. While Nobunaga was the fiery innovator and Hideyoshi the charismatic unifier, Ieyasu was the patient consolidator. He understood that true stability required not just military might, but also a robust administrative structure. He meticulously built up his territories, attracting skilled artisans and merchants, and developing efficient infrastructure. He was a master of political maneuvering, playing rivals against each other and forging strategic marriages to secure alliances. Upon Hideyoshi's death, the delicate balance of power among the regions quickly crumbled. The stage was set for the ultimate confrontation that would decide the fate of Japan. The confrontation came in 1600 at the Battle of Sekigahara. The battle itself was a clash of titans involving over 160,000 warriors, one of the largest samurai battles in Japanese history. Ieyasu, leading the Eastern Army, faced off against a coalition of Western daimyo loyal to Hideyori, led by the brilliant strategist Ishida Mitsunari. The morning of October 21st, 1600, dawned shrouded in a thick mist, adding to the tension and uncertainty. The battlefield, a narrow valley, would become a cauldron of chaos. The key to Ieyasu's victory lay not just in military prowess, but in his meticulous pre-battle negotiations and his ability to sow discord among his enemies. Many Western Army commanders had been secretly swayed by Ieyasu's promises of land and power, or had grudges against Mitsunari. The battle raged for hours, a brutal, desperate struggle of steel and blood. At a critical moment, Kobayakawa Hideaki, a general in the Western Army who had been wavering, suddenly switched sides, attacking his former allies. This betrayal, a turning point often debated in its precise timing and motivation, shattered the Western Army's morale and cohesion. The tide turned decisively in Ieyasu's favor. The Battle of Sekigahara was a resounding victory for Tokugawa Ieyasu. It was not just a military triumph. It was the political culmination of decades of warfare. Within days, Ieyasu had effectively established his dominance over Japan. 3 years later, in 1603, he was appointed shogun by the emperor, formally establishing the Tokugawa Shogunate, a dynasty that would rule Japan for over 250 years, ushering in an era of unprecedented peace and stability known as the Edo period. The legacy of these three great unifiers is intertwined, each building upon the foundations laid by the last. Nobunaga, the ruthless innovator, shattered the old order and began the process of centralization. Hideyoshi, the charismatic diplomat, consolidated power and brought a fragile unity, though his foreign ambitions proved costly. And Ieyasu, the patient strategist, secured the peace, establishing a lasting political structure that would shape Japan for centuries to come. Their combined efforts transformed a land of ceaseless conflict into a unified nation, a testament to their individual genius and their collective relentless pursuit of a singular vision. The echoes of their battles, the whispers of their strategies, and the weight of their decisions still resonate through the quiet halls of history, a reminder of the monumental task of forging a nation from disparate parts. The whispers of conflict, the clash of steel that had echoed across Japan for centuries, slowly began to fade, replaced by an unfamiliar quiet. After the tumultuous Sengoku Jidai, a new order emerged, not from the ashes of a single battle, but from the deliberate, methodical hand of Tokugawa Ieyasu. Having consolidated his power at the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600 and formally establishing the shogunate in 1603, Ieyasu set about building a peace designed to last, a peace born of strict control and unwavering authority. He understood that the perpetual warfare had exhausted the land and its people, but also that true stability could only be achieved by dismantling the very structures that had allowed such chaos to flourish. The Tokugawa shogunate, headquartered in Edo, the city that would one day become Tokyo, embarked on an ambitious project of social engineering. Society was meticulously stratified into a rigid hierarchy, a four-tiered system that, in theory, ensured order and prevented the resurgence of rebellious factions. At the very top, though largely symbolic, sat the emperor in Kyoto, a revered figurehead whose divine lineage provided legitimacy to the shogun's rule, yet held no true political power. Below him, the shogun reigned supreme, the ultimate military dictator. Then came the samurai, the warrior class, now transformed from independent, often land-owning fighters into administrators, bureaucrats, and retainers of the shogun and the various daimyo. Their swords, once instruments of war, became symbols of their status, rarely drawn in anger. They were expected to embody the virtues of Bushido, yet their primary role was to maintain the peace, not to break it. Below the samurai were the farmers, who, despite their low social standing, were considered essential as the producers of food, the very sustenance of the nation. Their lives were arduous, bound to the land, their harvests taxed heavily. Then came the artisans, skilled craftspeople who produced goods from pottery to textiles, their work contributing to the growing urban centers. At the bottom were the merchants, often viewed with suspicion despite their growing wealth, as they produced nothing themselves but profited from the labor of others. This system, while seemingly inflexible, was designed to create a sense of stability, to assign each person a place and a purpose within the grand design of the shogunate. Yet the reality was more fluid than the ideal. As the long peace endured, the samurai, deprived of war, often found themselves in debt to the very merchants they disdained, their stipends proving insufficient for the rising costs of urban life. This subtle shift in economic power, a slow erosion of the samurai's financial dominance, would become a quiet undercurrent throughout the Tokugawa period. One of the most defining policies of the Tokugawa shogunate was sakoku, the closed country policy, initiated gradually with increasing restrictions through the 1630s and formally implemented in 1639. This policy was a direct response to concerns about foreign influence, particularly the spread of Christianity and the destabilizing effects of European powers. The shogunate saw the arrival of Portuguese, Spanish, and later English and Dutch traders and missionaries not just as an economic opportunity, but as a threat to their newly established order. Christian converts, particularly in the South, had proven fiercely loyal to their new faith, sometimes even defying local daimyo, leading to events like the Shimabara Rebellion of 1637 to 1638, a peasant uprising with strong Christian undertones that was brutally suppressed. This rebellion solidified the shogunate's resolve to eliminate any perceived foreign threat. Under Sakoku, virtually all foreign contact was forbidden. Japanese citizens were prohibited from leaving the country, and those who had already traveled abroad were forbidden from returning. Foreigners, with a few carefully controlled exceptions, were barred from entering. The only remaining window to the outside world was the artificial island of Dejima in Nagasaki Harbor, where a small contingent of Dutch traders was allowed to operate under strict surveillance. Even the Chinese, long-standing trading partners, were confined to specific districts in Nagasaki. This isolation was not absolute, nor was it intended to completely cut Japan off. The Dutch, through their annual reports known as Fusetsugaki, provided the shogunate with information about global events, technological advancements, and political shifts in the West. These reports, though filtered and controlled, offered a glimpse into a world that Japan had largely chosen to step away from. The Sakoku policy had profound effects on Japanese society. It fostered a unique cultural development, allowing indigenous arts, philosophies, and traditions to flourish without significant external influence. Woodblock printing, kabuki theater, haiku poetry, and the tea ceremony all reached new heights of refinement during this period. The absence of war also meant that resources previously dedicated to military campaigns could be channeled into infrastructure, education, and the arts. Roads were improved, castle towns grew into bustling cities, and literacy rates, particularly among the samurai class, were remarkably high for the era. However, this isolation also meant that Japan fell behind in certain technological and scientific advancements that were rapidly transforming Europe. While the Dutch provided some insights, the practical application and widespread adoption of new technologies like steam power or advanced metallurgy were largely absent. The shogunate maintained its control through a sophisticated system of checks and balances. The Senkin Kotai, or alternate attendance system, was a brilliant stroke of political genius. Instituted by Ieyasu and formalized by his successors, this policy required every daimyo to spend alternate years residing in Edo, the shogun's capital. When they returned to their domains, they were required to leave their wives and eldest sons in Edo as hostages. This system served multiple purposes. It drained the daimyo's financial resources through the costly processions and maintenance of elaborate Edo residences, thus preventing them from accumulating enough wealth to challenge the shogunate. It also ensured their loyalty, as their family's safety depended on their obedience. Furthermore, the constant movement of daimyo and their retinues stimulated the economy along the major roads, fostering the growth of towns and services. The peace of the Tokugawa era was not without its internal tensions. While large-scale warfare ceased, there were occasional peasant uprisings driven by famine or oppressive taxation, and instances of samurai unrest, particularly among those who felt their traditional role had been diminished. The shogunate responded to these challenges with a firm hand, demonstrating its unwavering authority. Yet beneath the surface of this meticulously ordered society, subtle changes were underway. The rise of a merchant class, increasingly wealthy and influential, began to challenge the traditional social hierarchy. Their economic power grew, even as their social standing remained low, leading to a quiet tension between wealth and status. New urban cultures emerged, vibrant and consumer-driven, often at odds with the austere ideals of the samurai. Historians still debate the true motivations behind the Sakoku policy. Was it primarily driven by fear of foreign invasion and the spread of Christianity? Or was it also a strategic move to consolidate the shogunate's internal power by eliminating external distractions and potential alliances for rebellious daimyo? Some scholars argue that the shogunate, having just emerged from a century of civil war, simply sought to eliminate any variable that could disrupt the fragile peace it had so painstakingly built. Others guessed it was a more deliberate choice to foster a unique Japanese identity, free from outside corruption. Regardless of the primary motivation, the policy undeniably shaped Japan's trajectory for over 2 centuries, creating a society that was both remarkably stable and, in some ways, increasingly insular. The legacy of the Tokugawa shogunate is complex. It ushered in an unprecedented period of peace and stability, fostering economic growth and cultural flourishing. Yet, this came at the cost of individual freedoms and, ultimately, technological stagnation compared to the rapidly industrializing West. The samurai, once the fierce arbiters of war, became the guardians of peace, their martial prowess slowly giving way to administrative duties and scholarly pursuits. Perhaps these walls of isolation, built so carefully by Ieyasu and his successors, whispered stories of a world beyond. A world that would one day knock insistently on Japan's closed doors, bringing with it the end of this long, quiet slumber. For over 250 years, Japan existed in a self-imposed cocoon, developing its unique essence, unaware of the profound changes brewing in the world outside, changes that would eventually shatter its peaceful isolation and propel it onto the global stage once more. As the cherry blossoms dusted the meticulously raked gravel of the Zen gardens, a new era of profound peace settled over Japan, transforming the very essence of the warrior. The Edo period, beginning in 1603 with the establishment of the Tokugawa shogunate, ushered in an age where the sword, though still present, became less an instrument of war and more a symbol of status, discipline, and a way of life. This was the true crucible for what we now understand as samurai culture, a time when the ideals of Bushido, the way of the warrior, solidified into a comprehensive moral and ethical code that governed every aspect of a samurai's existence. No longer constantly embroiled in battle, the samurai found themselves in a unique position. They were the ruling class, administrators, scholars, and aesthetes, their lives now centered around the intricate rituals of court, the pursuit of martial perfection through endless practice, and the cultivation of refined arts. The concept of Bushido, while its roots stretched back centuries into the Kamakura period's emphasis on bravery and loyalty, truly blossomed in Edo. It was less a written creed and more a collection of unwritten principles passed down through generations: rectitude, courage, benevolence, respect, honesty, honor, and loyalty. Rectitude, or gi, demanded that a samurai always act with integrity and justice, making decisions based on moral principles rather than personal gain. Courage, was not merely fearlessness in battle, but the bravery to live righteously and face one's own flaws. Benevolence, Jin, often surprised those outside the warrior class, as it emphasized compassion and mercy, particularly towards those weaker than oneself. Respect, Rei, dictated meticulous politeness and deference in all social interactions, a hallmark of Japanese society to this day. Honesty, Makoto, meant that a samurai's word was his bond, and honor, Meiyo, was paramount, often valuing reputation above life itself. Finally, loyalty, Chugi, was the bedrock, unwavering devotion to one's lord, family, and principles, even unto death. The daily life of a samurai during the Edo period was a delicate balance of strict discipline and artistic pursuit. Their mornings often began before dawn, with meditation and rigorous martial training. Sword practice, kenjutsu, was paramount, but they also honed their skills in archery, kyudo, horsemanship, bujutsu, and even the use of the spear, sojutsu. These were not merely physical exercises. They were spiritual practices aimed at cultivating focus, self-control, and a calm mind even in the face of adversity. The perfection of form, the precise angle of a blade, the rhythm of a breath, all were reflections of an inner discipline. Beyond the martial arts, samurai were expected to be cultured individuals. Many became accomplished poets, calligraphers, and painters. The tea ceremony, chanoyu, became an essential part of their social and spiritual lives, offering a serene escape from the rigid formalities of their existence. Each gesture, each placement of a utensil was imbued with meaning, a slow dance of aesthetic appreciation and mindfulness. Flower arranging, ikebana, and the appreciation of nature were also highly valued. It was believed that a true warrior should possess not only strength and courage, but also a deep understanding of beauty and the transient nature of life, often reflected in the fleeting beauty of a cherry blossom or the impermanence of a dewdrop. Their homes, often modest yet meticulously maintained, reflected these values. Simplicity and functionality were key, with sliding paper screens, shoji, allowing for flexible spaces and a connection to the surrounding garden. The tokonoma, an alcove for displaying art, a scroll, or a flower arrangement, was a focal point, symbolizing the family's aesthetic sensibilities. Even their clothing, while varying in formality, was designed for practicality and dignity. With the kimono and hakama being common attire, the social structure of the Edo period was rigidly hierarchical, with the samurai at the top, followed by farmers, artisans, and merchants. This stability, enforced by the shogunate, meant that generations of samurai were born into a world where their primary role was no longer warfare, but governance and the maintenance of order. They served as officials, magistrates, and even teachers. Their swords, the katana and wakizashi, worn as a symbol of their authority and heritage, rather than for daily combat. The daisho, the pair of long and short swords, was the very soul of the samurai. Passed down through families, sometimes for centuries, each blade imbued with history and spirit. Yet this prolonged peace also presented challenges. Without constant warfare, some samurai struggled to find purpose, leading to a phenomenon known as ronin, masterless samurai. These individuals, having lost their lord through death, disgrace, or economic hardship, were often forced to wander, seeking new employment or turning to less honorable means of survival. While some became mercenaries or bodyguards, others opened dojos, teaching martial arts, or even became scholars and artists, adapting their skills to a changing world. The story of the 47 Ronin, a famous tale of unwavering loyalty and revenge from the early 18th century, epitomizes the enduring power of Bushido's tenets even in an age of peace. It recounts how a group of masterless samurai avenged their lord's death, knowing full well that their actions would lead to their own ritual suicide, seppuku. Speaking of seppuku, or harakiri, this ritual suicide was perhaps the most extreme manifestation of Bushido's emphasis on honor. It was not merely a way to avoid capture or disgrace, but a means to atone for a mistake, preserve one's honor, or follow one's lord in death. Performed with precise ritual, often in front of witnesses, it was an act of profound self-control and courage, demonstrating one's unwavering commitment to the code. While gruesome to modern sensibilities, it was viewed as a noble and honorable act within the context of samurai culture. The education of a samurai began early. Boys were trained in martial arts from a young age, often starting with wooden swords. They were also rigorously educated in classical Chinese and Japanese literature, history, philosophy, and ethics. Confucianism, with its emphasis on filial piety, loyalty, and social harmony, heavily influenced Bushido, providing a philosophical framework for the samurai's moral code. Zen Buddhism also played a significant role, particularly in cultivating mental discipline, detachment from worldly desires, and an acceptance of death. The practice of meditation was integral to developing the calm mind necessary for both martial prowess and philosophical contemplation. One lesser-known aspect of samurai life during this period was their engagement with urban culture. While the idealized image of a samurai is often one of austere discipline, many also participated in the vibrant city life of Edo, modern-day Tokyo, Kyoto, and Osaka. They frequented tea houses, attended kabuki theater performances, and engaged with the burgeoning merchant class, albeit from a position of superiority. Some even dabbled in the floating world of ukiyo-e, commissioning woodblock prints that depicted actors, courtesans, and landscapes, a fascinating contrast to their otherwise rigid existence. This interaction highlights the evolving nature of the samurai class, adapting to a society that was becoming increasingly urban and commercialized. Historians still debate the precise origins and evolution of Bushido. Was it a codified system that emerged organically from centuries of warrior practices? Or was it largely an idealized construct formalized during the peaceful Edo period to give purpose and structure to a warrior class no longer fighting wars? The elements of warrior ethics certainly existed prior to Edo. Many scholars argue that the comprehensive, philosophical framework we now associate with Bushido was largely a product of this era, shaped by Confucian and Buddhist thought, and disseminated through texts like the Hagakure, written in the early 18th century, which offered reflections on the way of the warrior and emphasized loyalty and the acceptance of death. This debate underscores the dynamic nature of historical interpretation, as different perspectives illuminate various facets of a complex cultural phenomenon. The Edo period, and with it the golden age of samurai culture, drew to a close in the mid-19th century. The arrival of Western powers and the subsequent Meiji Restoration in 1868 brought an end to feudalism and the samurai class itself. The wearing of swords was eventually outlawed, and the samurai's traditional stipends were abolished. While many samurai adapted, becoming civil servants, entrepreneurs, or even military officers in the new imperial army, the era of the sword-wielding warrior as the dominant social force was over. Yet the legacy of the samurai and the ideals of Bushido continued to resonate deeply within Japanese society. The emphasis on discipline, loyalty, honor, and self-sacrifice found new expressions in modern Japan, influencing everything from corporate culture to military ethics. The image of the samurai, with their unwavering courage and profound sense of duty, remains a powerful symbol, not just in Japan, but across the world. Their story is a testament to how a warrior class, forged in conflict, could transform itself into a sophisticated cultural elite, leaving behind a legacy that transcended the battlefield and shaped the very soul of a nation. Perhaps these ancient principles, honed in the quiet gardens and rigorous training halls of Edo, Japan, still whisper lessons of integrity and resilience to us across the centuries. The whispers of change that had begun to stir with the arrival of the first Europeans in the 16th century, though largely contained by the Tokugawa shogunate's policy of isolation, never truly faded. For over 2 centuries, Japan had cultivated an internal peace, a carefully constructed stillness under the watchful eye of the samurai. Yet beyond its shores, the world had accelerated, driven by industrial revolutions and colonial ambitions. The shogunate's sakoku, or locked country, policy, while preserving a unique cultural identity, also created a technological and military disparity that would soon become impossible to ignore. The early 19th century saw increasing incursions by foreign vessels, mostly whaling ships and trading vessels seeking to open Japan. These were often met with polite but firm rejections, sometimes even forceful expulsion. But the nature of these encounters began to shift. In 1844, King William II of the Netherlands sent a letter urging Japan to open its doors, warning of the inevitable consequences if it did not. This was not merely a friendly suggestion, it carried the implicit weight of burgeoning Western power. The true turning point arrived in 1853, a year etched into the collective memory as the beginning of the end for the old order. On a warm summer day, 4 black ships, belching smoke and defying the traditional Japanese concept of naval warfare with their steam propulsion, sailed into Edo Bay. Commanded by Commodore Matthew C. Perry of the United States Navy, this fleet was not merely seeking trade, it was demanding it, backed by the ominous presence of cannons that far outmatched anything the shogunate could muster. The sight of these black ships struck a profound fear and awe into the hearts of the Japanese. They were a stark, undeniable symbol of the technological gap that had widened during Japan's long slumber. Perry's arrival initiated a series of unequal treaties, beginning with the Treaty of Kanagawa in 1854. This treaty, signed under duress, opened 2 Japanese ports to American ships, allowed for an American consul to reside in Shimoda, and guaranteed humane treatment for shipwrecked American sailors. It was followed by similar treaties with Britain, Russia, France, and the Netherlands. These treaties were deeply humiliating for Japan. They included provisions for extraterritoriality, meaning foreign citizens in Japan were subject to the laws of their own countries, not Japanese law, and fixed low import duties, preventing Japan from protecting its nascent industries. The signing of these treaties without imperial sanction and the perceived weakness of the shogunate in the face of foreign demands ignited a powerful wave of anti-shogunate and anti-foreign sentiment. The cry of "Revere the Emperor, expel the barbarians," Son no Joy, resonated across the land, particularly among the samurai of the western domains. These domains, long resentful of Tokugawa dominance, saw an opportunity to challenge the shogunate's authority. Choshu and Satsuma, 2 of the most powerful domains, became hotbeds of this radical ideology. The samurai, once the unwavering pillars of the shogunate's authority, found themselves in a profound crisis of identity and purpose. For centuries, their primary role had been to maintain peace and order, to serve their lords, and to uphold the feudal hierarchy. But now, the very foundation of that hierarchy was crumbling. Their martial skills, honed over generations, seemed increasingly irrelevant against the steam-powered warships and modern artillery of the Western powers. A single cannon shot could decimate a line of swordsmen. The very essence of their existence, the sword, was being rendered obsolete by new technologies. This period saw a rise in political assassinations and violent clashes, as radical samurai, often leaderless or operating in small, zealous groups, targeted both foreign residents and shogunate officials. The British legation was attacked multiple times, and foreign merchants lived in constant fear. The shogunate, caught between foreign demands for order and internal rebellion, found itself increasingly paralyzed. The internal unrest culminated in the Boshin War, 1868 to 1869, a civil war fought between the forces loyal to the shogunate and those who supported the restoration of imperial rule. The imperial forces, primarily drawn from the domains of Satsuma, Choshu, and Tosa, were led by samurai who had embraced Western military technology and tactics. They had acquired modern firearms, trained their troops in Western drill, and even employed foreign military advisors. The shogunate, despite its long history of power, was slow to adapt. While some shogunate forces also adopted modern weaponry, their overall strategy and organization remained rooted in older traditions. The decisive Battle of Toba Fushimi in early 1868, just outside Kyoto, saw the shogunate's forces, though numerically superior, decisively defeated by the better-equipped and more disciplined imperial army. This battle marked the effective end of the Tokugawa shogunate. The young Emperor Meiji, who had ascended the chrysanthemum throne in 1867, became the symbolic head of the new government, though real power lay with the oligarchs from Satsuma and Choshu, who had orchestrated the restoration. The Meiji Restoration, as this transformative period came to be known, was not merely a change of government. It was a radical societal upheaval. The new government, recognizing the urgent need to modernize and strengthen Japan to resist Western domination, embarked on a series of sweeping reforms. The feudal system, which had defined Japan for centuries, was systematically dismantled. In 1871, the domains were abolished and replaced by prefectures, effectively stripping the daimyo of their power and land. This was a direct blow to the samurai class. Their stipends, once guaranteed by their lords, were gradually reduced and then commuted into government bonds. The right to wear swords in public, a cherished symbol of their status and identity, was abolished in 1876 with the Haitore Edict. This decree, more than any other, signaled the end of the samurai as a distinct social class. Imagine a warrior, whose very soul was intertwined with the blade at his hip, suddenly forbidden to carry it. It was a profound psychological blow, a stripping away of centuries of tradition and privilege. Many samurai found themselves adrift in this new world. Some adapted, entering government service, becoming policemen, or finding roles in the burgeoning industries. Others, unable to shed their warrior identity or find new purpose, struggled with poverty and disillusionment. There were those who resisted. The most significant of these was the Satsuma Rebellion of 1877, led by Saigo Takamori, a revered figure who had been instrumental in the Meiji Restoration, but grew disillusioned with the pace and nature of modernization, particularly the abolition of the samurai class. Saigo, often called the last samurai, led a force of disaffected samurai against the imperial army, which was now largely composed of conscripted commoners trained in Western military tactics. The rebellion was a tragic last stand of the old warrior class against the inexorable tide of modernity. Despite their bravery and martial skill, the samurai, armed primarily with swords and traditional firearms, were no match for the imperial army's modern rifles and artillery. The rebellion was brutally suppressed, and Saigo Takamori, like so many samurai before him, met his end by seppuku, preserving his honor in defeat. The suppression of the Satsuma Rebellion effectively marked the final, violent end of the samurai as a distinct social and military class. Their decline was not a sudden collapse, but a gradual erosion, hastened by the external pressures of Western powers and the internal necessity of modernization. The very qualities that had made them essential in a feudal society, their loyalty, their martial prowess, their adherence to a strict code of honor, became increasingly incompatible with the demands of a rapidly industrializing nation-state. Yet the legacy of the samurai did not vanish with their class. Their values, their dedication to duty, their emphasis on discipline and self-cultivation permeated Japanese society and influenced the emerging national identity. Bushido, the way of the warrior, though formalized and romanticized later, provided a moral framework that continued to resonate. Many of the leaders of the new Meiji government, the architects of modern Japan, were former samurai themselves, carrying the principles of their upbringing into the new era. The transition was not without its ironies. The very foreign powers that had forced Japan open inadvertently spurred a nationalistic fervor that would see Japan itself become a formidable imperial power in Asia within a few decades. The samurai's spirit of martial excellence, once directed inward to maintain feudal peace, was now channeled outward, contributing to the formation of a modern military that would project Japanese power across the Pacific. Historians still debate the extent to which the Meiji Restoration was a true revolution or a strategic adaptation by an elite seeking to retain power. Was it a genuine popular uprising against the shogunate, or a clever maneuver by powerful domains to seize control and modernize from above? The truth likely lies somewhere in between, a complex interplay of popular discontent, elite ambition, and the undeniable external pressure that forced Japan to either adapt or be colonized. The story of the samurai's decline is a poignant tale of tradition meeting modernity, of a revered warrior class grappling with obsolescence. From the silent, watchful guardians of feudal peace, they became symbols of a bygone era, their swords replaced by rifles, their loyalty redirected from local lords to a centralized nation-state. The echoes of their footsteps faded from the castle grounds, replaced by the clatter of trains and the hum of factories. But the spirit of the samurai, though transformed, continued to shape the soul of a nation, forging its path into a new and uncertain world. The mid-19th century dawned upon Japan with a sense of unease, a quiet tremor beneath the ancient foundations of the Tokugawa shogunate. For over 2 centuries, the nation had lived in an intentional, almost serene isolation, a self-imposed tranquility that had allowed its unique culture to flourish, its feudal structure to solidify. But the world beyond its shores had not stood still. Industrial revolutions had swept through Europe and America, forging powerful new technologies, particularly in naval warfare. It was only a matter of time before these forces, driven by expansionist ambitions and the search for new markets, would knock on Japan's closed door. That knock came with an undeniable force in 1853, in the form of 4 American warships, their black hulls ominous against the blue waters of Uraga Harbor. Commanded by Commodore Matthew Perry, these vessels, belching smoke and armed with formidable cannons, were a stark, undeniable symbol of the technological chasm that had opened between Japan and the West. Perry's mission was clear: to demand that Japan open its ports to trade and allow American ships to resupply. The sheer power displayed by the Black Ships sent a shockwave through the shogunate, exposing its military vulnerability and the inadequacy of its traditional defenses. The samurai, for generations the protectors of the realm, found their swords and bows suddenly rendered quaint against the might of steam-powered vessels and rifled artillery. This forced opening, formalized by the Treaty of Kanagawa in 1854, ignited a fierce debate within Japan. On one side were those who advocated for continued isolation, clinging to the old ways and fearing the corrupting influence of foreign ideas. On the other, a growing chorus of voices, particularly among younger, reform-minded samurai from the outer domains, recognized the urgent need for change. They understood that to resist the West was to risk colonization, a fate that had befallen many other Asian nations. Their rallying cry became Son no Joy, revere the emperor, expel the barbarians. This seemingly contradictory slogan actually encapsulated a deeper aspiration: to strengthen Japan by returning power to the emperor, thereby unifying the nation and making it strong enough to stand against foreign encroachment. The shogunate, weakened by internal dissent and external pressure, struggled to maintain control. The forced treaties, seen by many as humiliating concessions, further eroded its legitimacy. Anti-shogunate sentiment grew, particularly in powerful domains like Satsuma and Choshu, which had long chafed under Tokugawa rule. These domains, often led by ambitious and visionary samurai, began to secretly acquire Western weaponry and military training, preparing for a confrontation they knew was inevitable. The air was thick with tension, a sense of impending upheaval. Perhaps the ancient spirits of Japan, dwelling in the mountains and rivers, sensed the profound shift that was about to occur, a reordering of the very fabric of society. The simmering discontent finally boiled over in the late 1860s. A series of skirmishes and political maneuverings culminated in the Boshin War, 1868 to 1869, a civil conflict that pitted the pro-imperial forces, largely drawn from Satsuma and Choshu, against the shogunate's loyalists. The imperial forces, despite their initial numerical disadvantage, possessed superior morale and, crucially, a growing arsenal of modern weapons. The iconic image of samurai, clad in traditional armor, charging against lines of riflemen, highlights the tragic clash of eras. Though individual acts of bravery were abundant, the outcome was largely predetermined by technology. The shogunate's forces, despite their historical prestige, were gradually outmaneuvered and outfought. The decisive moment came with the surrender of Edo Castle in 1868, marking the effective end of the Tokugawa shogunate. The young Emperor Meiji, who had ascended to the chrysanthemum throne in 1867, was formally restored to power, though the real authority lay with the powerful samurai leaders who had spearheaded the revolution. This event, known as the Meiji Restoration, was not merely a change of government, it was a fundamental reorientation of Japan's destiny. The capital was moved from Kyoto to Edo, which was renamed Tokyo, Eastern capital, symbolizing a new beginning. With the emperor at the symbolic helm, the new government embarked on an ambitious and breathtakingly rapid program of modernization, often referred to as the Meiji Ishin, or Meiji Renovation. The first and perhaps most significant step was the dismantling of the old feudal order. The domains, Han, were abolished and replaced by prefectures, directly controlled by the central government. This move, initiated in 1871, effectively stripped the daimyo of their hereditary power and land, consolidating authority in Tokyo. It was a bold and risky move, as it challenged centuries of established tradition and the very foundation of samurai power. The abolition of the samurai class itself was a gradual but inevitable process. Initially, the new government sought to integrate samurai into the modern state. Many were given positions in the new bureaucracy, police force, or military. However, their traditional stipends, which had been paid by the daimyo, became a financial burden on the central government. In 1876, the government issued the Haitore Edict, which formally prohibited the wearing of swords in public, except for military and police personnel. This was a profound symbolic blow to the samurai, as the katana had been the very soul of their identity for centuries. Imagine the quiet despair of a samurai, forced to lay aside the blade that had been passed down through generations, the tangible link to his ancestors and his very purpose. Further reforms stripped the samurai of their hereditary stipends, replacing them with bonds that often proved insufficient. This economic hardship, combined with the loss of their social status and traditional role, led to widespread discontent among the former samurai. While many adapted, finding new roles as entrepreneurs, educators, or government officials, others struggled deeply. Some, unable to reconcile with the new order, resorted to rebellion. The most significant of these uprisings was the Satsuma Rebellion of 1877, led by Saigo Takamori, a revered figure who had been instrumental in the Meiji Restoration, but had grown disillusioned with the pace and direction of modernization. Saigo, a true samurai at heart, championed traditional values and opposed the rapid westernization that he felt was eroding Japan's spirit. His rebellion, though ultimately crushed by the new imperial army, an army composed largely of conscripts from all social classes, trained in Western military tactics and armed with modern rifles, marked the definitive end of the samurai as a military force. It was a poignant and bloody swan song for a class that had defined Japan for nearly 700 years. The image of Saigo, reportedly committing seppuku on the battlefield, became a powerful symbol of the passing of an era. With the feudal system dismantled and the samurai class effectively dissolved, Japan embarked on an unprecedented period of rapid industrialization and westernization. The new government, driven by a fierce desire to catch up with the West and avoid colonization, implemented sweeping reforms across every sector of society. A national conscript army was established, replacing the samurai as the nation's protectors. A modern navy was built, equipped with ironclad ships and steam power. Education was reformed, with compulsory schooling introduced for all children, regardless of social class, aiming to foster a literate and loyal citizenry. Infrastructure projects were launched with astonishing speed. Railroads, telegraph lines, and modern postal services began to crisscross the archipelago. Knitting the nation together. New industries, from textiles to steel, were established with government support, often importing Western machinery and expertise. The banking system was modernized, and a national currency, the yen, was introduced. The legal system was overhauled, adopting elements of Western law, and a constitution was promulgated in 1889, establishing a parliamentary system, albeit one with significant power still vested in the emperor. This period of intense transformation was not without its challenges. The rapid changes caused social dislocation, economic hardship for some, and cultural friction. There was a constant tension between the desire to embrace Western technology and knowledge and the need to preserve a distinct Japanese identity. Historians still debate the extent to which the Meiji leaders truly aimed to westernize Japan versus their primary goal of simply strengthening it enough to resist Western domination. Was it a genuine admiration for Western ideals, or a pragmatic necessity born of survival? Perhaps it was a complex blend of both, a careful dance between adoption and adaptation. For the ordinary people of Japan, the Meiji Restoration brought both opportunities and hardships. While new avenues for social mobility opened up and education became more accessible, the demands of industrialization often meant harsh working conditions and a disruption of traditional ways of life. Yet, the sense of national purpose, the drive to build a strong and independent Japan, was palpable. By the turn of the 20th century, Japan had transformed itself from an isolated feudal state into a formidable regional power. Its victory in the Sino-Japanese War, 1894 to 1895, and even more astonishingly, in the Russo-Japanese War, 1904 to 1905, demonstrated to the world that an Asian nation could not only adopt Western technology, but also defeat a major European power. These victories were a testament to the success of the Meiji reforms and the unwavering determination of the Japanese people. The legacy of the samurai, though their class was abolished, continued to subtly influence Japanese society. Their emphasis on discipline, loyalty, honor, and martial prowess was subtly reinterpreted and integrated into the new national identity. Bushido, the way of the warrior, was re-emphasized and promoted as a moral code for all citizens, not just a select warrior class. The spirit of the samurai, though no longer manifest in sword-wielding warriors, became an enduring part of the national psyche, a silent whisper in the wind that carried the echoes of an ancient past into a rapidly modernizing future. The era of feudal Japan, with its shoguns, daimyo, and samurai, had definitively closed, giving way to a new, modern nation on the global stage. Yet the roots of its strength and identity were undeniably intertwined with the very traditions it had so rapidly shed. The echoes of the samurai, though centuries removed from their battlefield prowess and political dominance, resonate with surprising clarity through the fabric of modern Japan. Their legacy, woven into the very threads of society, culture, and national identity, offers a profound testament to the enduring power of historical memory. Even as the Meiji Restoration sought to dismantle the feudal structures that had defined Japan for so long, the ideals and aesthetics associated with the samurai class did not simply vanish. Instead, they transformed, adapting to new contexts and finding expression in unexpected ways. One of the most palpable, enduring legacies is the concept of Bushido, the way of the warrior. While the formal codification of Bushido as a comprehensive ethical system is often attributed to works like Nitobe Inazo's Bushido, the soul of Japan in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, drawing upon earlier samurai traditions, its core tenets of loyalty, honor, self-discipline, and courage had long been cultivated within the warrior class. In modern Japan, these values, though stripped of their martial context, have been reinterpreted to emphasize dedication to work, group harmony, and personal integrity. The unwavering loyalty, once directed towards a lord, can now be seen sublimated into fierce corporate loyalty or a deep commitment to one's community. The emphasis on self-discipline and perseverance, once crucial for martial training, now underpins the nation's renowned work ethic and its pursuit of excellence in diverse fields, from technology to traditional arts. The aesthetic influence of the samurai is equally pervasive. The stark simplicity and profound beauty of Zen Buddhism, which found fertile ground among the samurai for its emphasis on discipline, meditation, and direct experience, continues to shape Japanese art, architecture, and garden design. the precise lines of a traditional Japanese garden, the minimalist elegance of a tea ceremony, or the quiet strength of a sumie ink painting, all carry the subtle imprint of a warrior class that sought spiritual solace and philosophical depth amidst the rigors of their existence. Even the meticulous craftsmanship seen in modern Japanese products, from precision electronics to culinary arts, can be traced back to the samurai's demand for perfection in their tools and weapons, where a flaw could mean the difference between life and death. The very shape of a katana, with its exquisite curve and razor edge, remains an icon of Japanese artistry and engineering, inspiring reverence and fascination worldwide. The martial arts themselves, once integral to samurai training, have evolved into global disciplines like kendo, judo, and aikido. Kendo, the way of the sword, directly preserves the techniques and spirit of samurai swordsmanship, albeit with bamboo swords and protective armor. It emphasizes not just physical skill, but also mental fortitude, respect, and etiquette, embodying many of the virtues once central to samurai training. Judo, developed in the late 19th century by Kano Jigoro, drew upon various jujutsu schools practiced by samurai, transforming potentially lethal techniques into a competitive sport focused on physical fitness, mental discipline, and ethical conduct. These martial arts, while no longer preparing warriors for battle, continue to instill discipline, respect, and a sense of tradition in practitioners across the globe, serving as living conduits to the samurai past. In the realm of national identity, the samurai often serve as a powerful symbol of Japan's unique historical trajectory and its spirit of resilience. During periods of national crisis or rapid modernization, the image of the stoic, honorable warrior has been invoked to inspire unity and determination. While this romanticized view sometimes overlooks the complexities and brutalities of feudal life, it nonetheless provides a foundational narrative for national pride. The concept of Yamato Damashi, or the Japanese spirit, often carries connotations of the samurai's unwavering courage, loyalty, and stoicism in the face of adversity. This idealized image, though selectively curated, helps to articulate a distinct sense of self on the global stage. However, the legacy is not without its complexities or scholarly debates. Historians still debate the extent to which the concept of Bushido as a unified, ancient code truly existed during the feudal period, or if it was largely a construct of the Meiji era, developed to provide a moral framework for a rapidly modernizing nation and to legitimize the new imperial system. While samurai certainly adhered to various codes of conduct, these were often localized, clan-specific, and evolved over time, lacking the universal philosophical coherence that later interpretations ascribed to Bushido. This discussion highlights the dynamic nature of historical memory and how societies selectively interpret their past to serve present needs. Furthermore, the popular image of the samurai, often derived from Chanbara films and historical dramas, can sometimes overshadow the more mundane realities of their lives. While tales of legendary swordsmen and epic battles captivate the imagination, the daily lives of many samurai, particularly during long periods of peace, involved administrative duties, scholarly pursuits, and agricultural management, rather than constant martial engagement. Many samurai, especially those of lower rank, were little more than armed bureaucrats or farmers, struggling to make ends meet. This lesser-known aspect contrasts sharply with the popular heroic narrative. The enduring fascination with the samurai is also evident in popular culture. Anime, manga, video games, and films frequently draw upon samurai themes, reinterpreting their stories and aesthetics for new generations. From futuristic samurai in science fiction to historical dramas that meticulously recreate feudal Japan. These narratives explore universal themes of honor, duty, sacrifice, and justice through the lens of the warrior class. This cultural omnipresence ensures that the samurai remain a vibrant part of the global imagination, continuously reinterpreted and reimagined. Even the design of modern Japanese architecture and fashion sometimes subtly incorporates elements derived from traditional samurai aesthetics, such as clean lines, muted colors, and an emphasis on functional elegance. The physical remnants of the samurai era also continue to shape the landscape of Japan. Majestic castles, once the strongholds of daimyo and the centers of their domains, stand as powerful reminders of feudal power. Though many were destroyed during conflicts or the Meiji Restoration, those that remain, like Himeji Castle or Matsumoto Castle, are meticulously preserved, drawing millions of visitors annually. These structures, with their imposing stone walls and intricate wooden architecture, whisper stories of sieges, political intrigue, and the daily lives of those who lived within their confines. Temples and shrines patronized by samurai, often containing their graves or memorials, continue to be places of worship and reflection, linking the present to a distant past. The old samurai districts in cities like Kanazawa, with their preserved residences and narrow lanes, offer a tangible glimpse into the urban planning and domestic life of the warrior class. The very concept of giri, duty or obligation, and ninjo, human emotion, a tension often explored in samurai narratives, continues to resonate in Japanese social interactions. The delicate balance between fulfilling one's responsibilities to the group and acknowledging individual desires is a recurring theme in Japanese society, reflecting a deep-seated cultural value that finds roots in the hierarchical and duty-bound world of the samurai. The emphasis on politeness, respect for elders, and meticulous attention to detail in social interactions can also be seen as a continuation of the strict etiquette and hierarchical awareness cultivated within the feudal system. Even specific historical figures from the samurai era continue to inspire. Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu, the three unifiers of Japan, remain towering figures whose strategic brilliance and complex personalities are endlessly analyzed and celebrated. Their stories, often embellished with legendary feats, serve as archetypes of leadership, ambition, and the pursuit of power. Similarly, figures like Miyamoto Musashi, the legendary swordsman and author of the Book of Five Rings, are revered not just for their martial prowess, but for their philosophical insights into strategy and self-mastery. The enduring presence of these historical figures, architectural marvels, and philosophical concepts demonstrates that the samurai were not merely a historical class that faded away. Instead, their spirit, their values, and their aesthetic sensibilities permeated the very foundations of Japanese culture, evolving and adapting to survive the seismic shifts of modernization. The legacy of the samurai is not a static relic of the past, but a dynamic, living force that continues to shape the identity of a nation, quietly influencing its values, its arts, and its understanding of itself.